"You're not being supportive of our family," she said, like it was some kind of sin to have a doctor's appointment. That's all it was. Just a follow-up after my knee surgery. But apparently, needing one weekend for myself meant I no longer deserved to be their mother. I was sitting on the edge of my bed when the call came through. The Friday sun had barely tilted west, and I had just finished folding a small basket of towels, still warm, still smelling faintly of lavender. Jenna's name lit up the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. She only called when she needed something. "Hey, Mom," she said, skipping straight over greetings. "Can you watch the baby this weekend? We've got that work retreat in Asheville, and Emma's staying with Nate's parents. We'll be back late Sunday." I told her no, as gently as I could. I explained that I had an appointment Saturday morning, just a follow-up, nothing serious. But the timing was tight. And the truth was, I was tired. My knee still ached in the mornings, and 2 days alone with a 10-month-old was more than I could manage right now. There was silence on the other end. Then sharp and cold. "Wow. Okay. I guess you're just not being very supportive of our family." I felt it like a slap. I opened my mouth to speak, to remind her of the thousands of dollars I'd handed over for her down payment, the hours I'd spent rocking her babies while she napped, the nights I stayed when Tommy was colicky. But I didn't say a word. "What was the point?" "I just didn't expect this from you," Jenna continued. "We really needed you this weekend. I don't know what we're going to do now." "You're their parents," I said quietly. "You'll figure it out." She hung up without another word. An hour later, I received a text. "Please don't come by the house anymore. It's time for some boundaries. We've changed the locks." I read it twice. Then again. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I pressed my lips together so hard I felt them tremble. My heart pounded in my ears. Not even a phone call, just a message. After everything. After all the years, the locks changed, like I was a threat, like I was a stranger. I drove to their house anyway. Call it instinct, or maybe just disbelief. The streets looked the same as always, suburban quiet, bikes on lawns, flags wilting in the summer heat. But something had shifted, something fundamental. I parked across from the pale brick 2-story that I had helped them buy, and for a moment, I just stared at the door. It was the same door I'd painted with Jenna the day they moved in. She was pregnant with Emma then, her belly round, her eyes tired but excited. We picked out a deep forest green color, and she joked that it looked too grown up. That same door didn't open when I rang the bell. I waited. No answer. I rang again. The baby's stroller was folded neatly on the porch. One of Emma's tiny sneakers was lying under the swing. Then I heard it. Footsteps inside. Quick, whispered voices. Someone peeked from behind the upstairs curtain. I rang a third time, more out of habit than hope. Nothing. I tried the key. The key I'd used for 5 years, ever since they made me a copy, just in case. It didn't turn. It caught and jerked, unmoving. She really had changed the locks. I walked back to my car slowly, like I was balancing something fragile. It was hard to tell if I was shaking from anger or grief, maybe both. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. Then I started laughing. Quiet, breathless, ridiculous laughter. It came out in stutters and wheezes like I'd lost my mind, because that's what it felt like. Like I'd woken up in some alternate version of my life, one where my daughter had decided I was no longer needed. Or worse, unwanted. Back home, I made tea and forgot to drink it. I wandered the kitchen, touching things as if to remind myself they were real. The hand-drawn cards from Emma still hung on the fridge. Best grandma. I love you. Crayon hearts, shaky block letters. A paper turkey with my traced hand. I sat down and stared at the messages. The lock. The words. You're not being supportive of our family. I'd been supportive, hadn't I? The mortgage co-signed. The emergency C-section, covered by my savings when their insurance fell short. Countless meals. Babysitting at a moment's notice. Every birthday cake. Every Halloween costume stitched by my own hands. I didn't keep receipts, but the proof was everywhere. In their walls, their cupboards, their children. I picked up my phone and typed a message, then deleted it, typed another, deleted it too. What could I possibly say? Nothing would sound right. Nothing would make them open the door. I stood by the window as the streetlights flicked on, one by one. I hadn't even changed out of the clothes I wore to run errands that morning. I didn't move until the clock struck midnight, and even then, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I moved through the house like a guest in someone else's life. The silence felt heavier than usual. I didn't turn on the radio like I always did. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't want the light. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a piece of dry toast and a cup of tea that went cold before I could drink it. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. But everything else had gone still. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one where Emma used to sit with her juice box, legs swinging, telling me about school, the one where Jenna would collapse after a long day, sighing like the world owed her something for surviving it. How had I ended up here? How had I raised a daughter who could shut a door on her mother with such ease? At noon, I opened the small tin where I kept all the little things they'd given me. A pressed flower from Emma. A photo booth strip with Jenna in her 20s, smiling wide and wild. A thank you card from Nate after Tommy was born, written hastily, but it said, "We don't know what we'd do without you." I sat with that line for a long time. Apparently, they figured it out. My phone buzzed once, and I jumped. But it wasn't Jenna. It was a spam message about car insurance. I set the phone down and pushed it away, like it might bite. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took out the folder. The big yellow one with the black clip. Family expenses written in faded ink across the top. Inside were records. I'd kept them, not for leverage, not out of pride, but because I was a librarian by trade and by nature. I recorded things. Not everything. Never the small favors, the sleepless nights, the hours I spent driving across town. But the big ones. The money. The legal things. The obligations I'd taken on because I was the only one who could. The $12,000 for their down payment. The $4,300 to cover Emma's hospital bills when Nate lost his job. The $800 stroller Jenna said she absolutely needed. The tuition payments I helped with so Emma could stay in her Montessori school. None of it was begrudged. Not then. I had the means. I had the heart. That was the role, wasn't it? The giving mother, the reliable grandmother, the solid background figure who keeps everything going without asking for anything in return. But now I was asking myself something for the first time. Who takes care of me? I looked around the house. No one else was here. No one was calling to check if I was okay. No one was asking if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping, if I had cried all night. I had. The grief wasn't loud. It didn't come in sobs or screams. It settled like dust in my lungs, slow, suffocating, and impossible to explain to anyone who hadn't felt it. She changed the locks. I whispered it aloud just to hear how absurd it sounded. Like I was some reckless intruder, instead of the woman who had once rocked her daughter through nights of fever and fear. I stood up. My knees ached as they always did, but I moved with purpose. I took out the small framed photo from the living room shelf, Jenna holding baby Emma, me beside them, all of us younger and softer looking. I set it face down on the table. Then I walked into the bedroom and started looking for my lawyer's card. The card was where I'd left it, inside my old address book, between the dentist and the vet. I hadn't called Alan Rivers in over 6 years, not since I updated my will after my husband passed. But he'd known me since Jenna was in high school, and he'd always spoken to me like a person with a brain, not a sentimental old woman. I dialed the number and waited. "Rivers and McKinley, this is Abby," the receptionist chirped. "Hi, dear. This is Marilyn Joyce. I was a client of Mr. Rivers some years ago. I'd like to make an appointment with him at his earliest convenience." There was a pause, the sound of keys clacking. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Joyce. Let me check his schedule. We can fit you in Tuesday morning at 10. "Perfect, thank you." She asked if I needed a reminder call. I said no. When I hung up, I felt something shift in me. Not anger, not grief this time, but a strange, subtle strength. Like I had picked up a piece of myself I didn't realize I'd lost. I wasn't planning to sue anybody. I wasn't going to show up at their doorstep with documents and demands. But I needed clarity. I needed to understand what I had built and what I had given away. Later that day, I pulled out a box from the hallway closet marked House. Inside were deeds, receipts, insurance forms. I hadn't looked at them in years. I flipped through until I found it. The equity loan agreement. The one I had signed to help Jenna and Nate secure their second mortgage back when they wanted to expand the kitchen and add the nursery. They hadn't qualified on their own. I was listed as a co-signer. No ownership, no say. Just responsibility. I looked at another folder, my retirement account statements. Several wire transfers to Jenna's account over the years. Bridge between jobs, she'd called it. Just until Nate's next commission check comes in. I'd never asked for repayment, never even mentioned it. Somehow, needing the money back felt more shameful than giving it. I sat in my chair, holding the papers, letting them speak for themselves. I had helped them build a life, but I wasn't part of it. I remembered a conversation from last year. Jenna had been venting about Nate's mother, of all people. "She always tries to insert herself," she'd said. "I can't stand the guilt trips. I wish she'd just back off." At the time, I nodded sympathetically. But now I wondered if she said that to me for a reason. A warning. That evening, I walked around my small home slowly, as if seeing it for the first time in years. Everything here had been chosen with care. The blue floral curtains, the old oak bookshelves, the rocking chair in the corner. None of it expensive, but all of it mine. I stood at the window and watched the sun slip below the rooftops. Somewhere out there, my daughter was tucking her children into bed, perhaps thinking about how she'd set boundaries, as if I were some unruly obligation. Well, two can set boundaries. I didn't sleep much that night. Again. But it wasn't the tossing, spiraling kind of wakefulness. It was quiet, focused, like something inside me had turned a dial, and I was finally tuned in to my own frequency. By 6 a.m., I was at the kitchen table with a pen, a notepad, and 3 envelopes I kept in the bottom drawer of the hutch. Medical, home repairs, and Jenna. I opened the last one. Inside was every thank you card, every printed receipt, every bank slip I'd saved over the years, not for proof, not for shame, but for memory, for the record of where I had placed my love. The earliest one was dated 12 years ago. $2,000 to cover a deposit when Nate lost his job, and they had to move on short notice. I remembered the phone call like it had happened yesterday. "Mom, I wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. I hate this. I hate asking you. But I don't have anyone else to call." I'd said yes before she'd finished the sentence. Then came the others, like breadcrumbs leading through a forest. Daycare gaps, insurance hiccups, that time Emma needed braces, and their dental plan wouldn't cover more than the consultation. All of it. Hundreds here, thousands there. Each one a version of the same story. Just this once. "We'll figure it out soon." "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver." But the problem with being a lifesaver is that no one thinks of you until they're drowning. And the moment they're back on dry land, you're forgotten. I thought of the times I said yes, even when I wanted to say no. When I canceled lunch with my one friend left in town so I could pick Emma up early. When I skipped my arthritis checkup because no one else could watch Tommy. When I spent my last winter's heating bill money on Christmas gifts for their kids because Jenna said Emma would be devastated without the dollhouse that all her friends had. Each time I told myself it was love. Sacrifice. What mothers do. Now I wasn't sure if it was love or fear. Fear that if I stopped giving, I'd stop mattering. I set the envelope down and stood up slowly. My knees didn't like that, but they obeyed. I walked to the front door and opened it. The morning air smelled like dew and old grass. Across the street, my neighbor Helen was already watering her begonias in her pink robe. She waved. I didn't wave back. Not out of rudeness. I just couldn't lift my hand. Not yet. Back inside, I made tea and stared at my phone. Nothing. No message from Jenna, no follow-up, no apology, not even a line to explain. Was this really it? A weekend refusal, a doctor's appointment, a single word, no, and I was erased. I picked up the phone, scrolled to her name, hovered. Then I put it down again. What would I say? That I was sorry for needing one Saturday to take care of my own health? That I'd cancel the appointment again if she'd just let me back into the lives I'd helped build? I couldn't do that. Not anymore. Because here was the truth I'd been avoiding, and it hit me with the stillness of a final note. This wasn't the first time Jenna had punished me for setting a limit. It was just the first time she'd made it permanent. I thought back to last year when I told her I couldn't fly out for their anniversary because the doctor had warned against long-distance travel with my blood pressure. She hadn't spoken to me for weeks after that, said I was choosing my ailments over her milestones. Before that, the christening, when I'd asked if they could maybe consider a date when I wasn't scheduled for physical therapy. She'd told me I was being difficult, that she didn't need drama. Every time I advocated for myself, she responded with distance, coldness, silence. And I, like a fool, came crawling back, with gifts, with apologies I didn't owe, until now. Now I was standing still, letting the silence settle. I didn't send a text. I didn't offer explanations. I took a deep breath, walked to the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled Estate. Then I picked up the phone and called Alan Rivers again. "Can we add a few more items to discuss on Tuesday?" I asked. "Of course, Mrs. Joyce. What's on your mind?" "My power of attorney. I'd like to revoke it, and I need to make some changes to my will." Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. I filled the time the only way I knew how, cleaning, dusting corners that hadn't seen daylight in months, scrubbing the kitchen grout with vinegar and an old toothbrush, rearranging books I no longer had the eyesight to read but couldn't bear to give away. It was a strange sort of preparation, like I was readying the house for a guest who would never come. The morning of my appointment, I woke up before the alarm and stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I brushed my hair, put on my soft blue blouse with the pearl buttons, and even dabbed on a touch of lipstick. Not for anyone else. For me, to remember who I was when no one was looking. The drive to Alan's office took 30 minutes, and I spent every second rehearsing the words in my head. But when I sat down in the brown leather chair across from him, the words came easily. "I'd like to revoke the power of attorney I granted to my daughter," I said plainly. Alan blinked, then nodded slowly. "That's no problem. We can draft the document today. Are you sure, Marilyn?" "Absolutely." I folded my hands in my lap. She no longer needs that kind of access to my life. He didn't ask for details, and I appreciated that. Next, we reviewed my will. The language was all still there: Jenna and Nate as primary beneficiaries, Emma and Tommy to receive small educational trusts. The home, the accounts, the assets, all of it would go to them. "I'd like to change that," I said. Alan tilted his head slightly. "All of it?" "Yes. I want everything placed into a trust for my niece, Claire. She's been good to me, not out of obligation, just kindness." He nodded again. "We can set that up. It's your right." We worked in silence for a while, papers rustling, pens clicking. I signed where he pointed, and with each signature, I felt a little weight slide off my chest. Before I left, he handed me a copy of the revocation. "If your daughter tries to act on your behalf with any financial institution, they'll be required to reject it." I took the paper, folded it neatly into my bag. "Thank you, Alan." Outside, the sky was overcast, but I felt light. Like I'd stepped into a version of my life where I was no longer waiting for someone to recognize my worth. I had done it myself. When I got home, I called the bank next. It took 3 transfers and 1 tedious identity check, but finally, I reached someone named Derek in the senior accounts department. "I need to cancel all scheduled transfers to my daughter's accounts," I said. "Immediately." He hesitated. "All of them, ma'am? I see there are several recurring payments." "Yes, all. I'll handle the penalties." Another pause. "May I ask the reason for cancellation?" I thought about answering, about saying something vague like financial restructuring or changes in the family. But instead, I told the truth. "Because I've decided that my support doesn't have to come at the cost of my dignity." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Understood. We'll process the cancellations today." "Thank you." After we ended the call, I sat very still. The silence in the room felt different now. Not lonely, not empty, but clean. Like space I had finally reclaimed. The next morning, I went to the bank in person. Not because I didn't trust Derek, but because some things, important things, deserve to be done face to face. I wore my good coat, the one I used to save for church and weddings. It was too warm for it, really, but it made me feel prepared, presentable, like someone who took herself seriously, even if others hadn't in a long time. The branch was quiet, just the low murmur of conversations and the gentle hum of printers. A young woman with glossy black hair greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I have an appointment with the branch manager," I said. "Your name?" "Marilyn Joyce." She typed something, nodded, and gestured toward the waiting area. "Ms. Quinn will be with you shortly." I sat near the window, clutching my purse with both hands. Not because I was nervous, but because I was holding history. Statements, receipts, photocopies of payments made over a decade. Evidence, I suppose, though I wasn't here to prove anything. I just wanted clarity. Ms. Quinn appeared 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with a sharp blazer and eyes that missed nothing. She greeted me warmly, but professionally. "Mrs. Joyce, please come in." Her office was too cold. I didn't say anything. I just followed her and sat across the desk. "I understand you'd like to make some changes to your accounts?" "Yes," I said. "I want all outgoing transfers to my daughter's household permanently canceled. I also want to create a separate trust." She didn't blink, just reached for a pen. "Do you already have a beneficiary in mind?" "My niece, Claire Linton. She lives in Portland. She visits every year, calls just to say hello. She once drove across 2 states to bring me soup when I was sick." Ms. Quinn nodded without comment. "I'd like the funds that were previously designated for my daughter's household redirected into this trust," I continued, "but not just the recurring payments. All remaining discretionary funds I've held back in case of family need. I no longer consider that a healthy category." I thought I saw her mouth twitch into the barest hint of a smile. We spent the next hour going over details, percentages, access terms, investment options. I asked questions. I made decisions. I signed papers. "I'll need to submit identification forms for Ms. Linton," she said, "and some paperwork will need her signature to activate full access." "She's expecting it," I replied. "I already told her there might be something small." I didn't tell her how much. It wasn't an enormous sum by modern standards, but it was more than I'd ever had growing up, more than I'd ever expected to save. I wanted it to go to someone who would use it with care, not entitlement. When we finished, Ms. Quinn stood and extended her hand. "Is there anything else I can help with today?" "Yes," I said. "Can you print a list of every transaction I've made to my daughter's family in the last 10 years? She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, simply typing at her keyboard. A few minutes later, she handed me a stack, page after page of deposits, transfers, payments. I took the bundle and slipped it into my purse without looking. "Thank you." Outside, the sun had come out. I walked to my car slowly, the documents pressing a gentle weight against my side. Not heavy, just real. Back home, I made tea and spread the pages across my dining room table. My own name printed over and over. Small sums, large ones. The monthly grocery stipend, Emma's private lessons, Nate's dental work, gas money, car payments, a water heater replacement. I circled each one with a red pen. Not to shame myself, to remember. I counted 123 transfers over 10 years, and that didn't include gifts, groceries, or babysitting. That didn't include the nights I slept on their couch when they were sick, or the holidays I spent cooking for 12 while they smiled for pictures and let me wash every dish alone. 123 times I said yes. Until now. That evening, I sat down with a fresh sheet of paper and wrote a letter. Not one I would send. Just one I needed to write. "Dear Jenna, I hope someday you'll understand that love and obedience are not the same thing. I raised you to be strong, and I'm sorry if that strength made you think I was unbreakable. I said yes too many times, not because I didn't have limits, but because I thought saying no would mean losing you. I see now I lost you anyway, so now I choose myself. I signed it, then folded it, placed it in the drawer, and let the stillness return. I hadn't planned to tell anyone, not yet. Not until the dust settled. But then the call came from Nate, late Thursday afternoon, unexpected and far too polite to be sincere. "Hey, Marilyn, just wanted to check in. Jenna mentioned you've been taking some space. We respect that. Of course. But she's worried about you." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "I'm fine, Nate. Is there something you need?" There was a pause, short but sharp. "Well, I noticed the grocery transfer didn't come through this week, And the car insurance, too. I figured it was a banking error. No, I said. Not an error. Another pause, longer this time. Right. So, is everything okay? I could hear it then, the shift in his voice. Concern hardening into irritation. That quiet entitlement rearing its head. I've decided to stop the payments, I said. All of them. There was silence, not even breathing. Then, did something happen? I wanted to ask him if he really had to ask, if he thought it was normal to change the locks on the woman who'd rocked his children to sleep. But I didn't. Instead, I said, Jenna made it very clear I'm no longer part of your family, and I'm simply respecting that. I think, maybe you're taking things a little personally, he said. That did make me laugh, quietly, bittersweet. Goodbye, Nate. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Jenna. Mom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're creating a lot of stress in our household. This is not how families behave. I stared at the screen, then turned the phone over, face down on the table. That evening, I returned to Alan Rivers' office to finalize the will. He greeted me with that same calm demeanor, as if we were discussing a crossword puzzle and not the redistribution of a lifetime's worth of effort. Everything's prepared as we discussed, he said, handing me the thick document. Your niece Claire will inherit the house, the accounts, and the remaining assets. Your daughter and her family have been removed as beneficiaries. I read the first page slowly, feeling each clause land with quiet precision. And the trust? Active as of this morning, he confirmed. Claire's already received the notification and will have access once we complete the last signature. He handed me the pen. I didn't hesitate. When I was done, he gathered the papers, tapping the edges neatly into a folder. Are you sure you don't want to leave a token amount to your daughter? Sometimes people prefer a gesture, even symbolic. No, I said. I left her enough already. We sat in silence a moment. Then he said, more softly, It's never easy, Marilyn, even when it's necessary. I met his eyes. She changed the locks. That was the easy part. For her. I'm just following the rules she set. He nodded. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling leaves down the sidewalk. I walked to my car slowly, not because my knees were stiff, but because I felt strangely tall, anchored. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I almost never did. I wasn't celebrating, not exactly, but I wanted to mark the moment, not with fanfare, but with quiet acknowledgement. I had done something hard. I had told the world I would not be used anymore, not even by those I loved most. And strangely, in the stillness of that evening, I felt no regret. Later, as I washed the glass and turned off the lights, I passed the small side table in the hallway, the one with the frame of Emma's first school picture. I stopped. Gently, I lifted the photo out of the frame and tucked it into a drawer, not to throw it away, not to forget, but because I no longer needed it to remind me who I was. The next morning, I got a knock at the door. Not the postman, not a neighbor, not even someone I expected. It was Lorraine Baxter. She stood there with a paper bag and a half smile that didn't quite mask her concern. I brought cinnamon rolls, she said. Still warm. Figured you might not be baking much lately. I hadn't seen Lorraine in nearly 2 years, not since her husband's memorial service. We used to talk every week, back when our daughters were in school together, and we still believed we had more time than we knew what to do with. I stepped aside. Come in. She set the bag on the kitchen counter like she'd never left. Same brisk movements, same sensible shoes. She poured the coffee herself without asking. I didn't stop her. "You've been quiet," she said after a few sips. "I've been occupied." She nodded, stirring her cup with the handle of her spoon. "Jenna called me, said you were having one of your moods, that you were withdrawing from the family." I didn't flinch. "Is that what she told you?" "She did. But I told her I'd come check for myself." I laughed softly. "Well, I'm not in the middle of a nervous breakdown, if that's what you're wondering." I didn't think so. Lorraine set her cup down. "I told her you were the most clear-eyed woman I've ever known, and that if you were doing something drastic, it probably meant something drastic had happened." I looked at her then, really looked at her. The creases at the corners of her eyes, the sharp tilt of her chin. She wasn't here out of curiosity. She was here because she knew what it meant to be pushed too far. "I said no to watching the baby for one weekend," I said. "Because I had a doctor's appointment. Jenna said I wasn't being supportive of the family." Then she changed the locks. Lorraine let out a slow, bitter breath. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph." "She texted me," I added. "Didn't even call, just told me not to come around anymore." Lorraine's eyes didn't blink. "And Nate?" "Asked why I canceled the car insurance transfer. As if that was the crime." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm, steady. "You've been carrying them for years, Marilyn, and they only noticed when you let go." I said nothing. "Good," she added after a moment. "About time someone reminded these grown children that love isn't a debit card." I smiled then, a small, real thing that touched the edges of my ribs. We sat for a long while, talking. Not about Jenna or the money or the hurt, but about books and old neighbors and the quiet horror of modern coffee machines. Lorraine refilled our cups twice. At one point, we laughed so hard I had to press a napkin to my eyes. When she stood to leave, she turned in the doorway and said, "If she comes crawling back, and she might, make sure she brings a key, not an apology." I nodded. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do if Jenna came back. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't be waiting by the window. After Lorraine left, I wandered back into the living room and sank into the armchair. The house felt different now. Not fuller. Not emptier. Just mine. The phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was Emma. "Grandma, it's me. I don't really know what's going on, but Mommy's been crying and Daddy's yelling and I miss you. I miss your house and the stories and, I don't know, can I come over sometime? Even if Mommy says no?" Her voice cracked at the end. She didn't sound 5 anymore. She sounded older than that. Older than she should have had to be. I stared at the phone a long time after the message ended. And then, without thinking, I hit save. I didn't call back. Not yet. But I wrote her name down on a small yellow notepad I kept on the counter. Emma. Not as a promise, as a beginning. The letter came the next day. A real letter. Envelope, stamp, her handwriting on the front. I recognized it immediately. Jenna always made her capital J's like backward 7s, something her 3rd-grade teacher could never quite break her of. I held the envelope for a full 5 minutes before I opened it. Inside, 2 pages, written in blue ink. No greeting, no dear Mom. Just a first sentence like a slap. "I hope you realize what you're doing to this family." I kept reading. She wrote that Nate was furious, that Emma was confused, that the timing of all this couldn't be worse, given how hard they were working to keep things stable, that my behavior had become erratic, that she was hurt, but also concerned. She asked if I was depressed. if maybe I needed someone to talk to. She suggested therapy, lightly, the way people do when they're trying to pretend they're not insulting you. She didn't mention the lock. She didn't mention the text. And she certainly didn't apologize. The last paragraph sealed it. We're still willing to include you in our lives, but only if you're willing to be a team player. Families require sacrifice, Mom. You taught me that. I folded the letter neatly, twice, and set it back in the envelope. Then I walked it over to the fireplace and placed it on the grate. I didn't light it. I didn't need to. I just didn't want it on my table anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No pills. No turning over and over like a coin that can't land. In the morning, I made oatmeal and didn't check my phone. At noon, I walked to the mailbox and found 2 catalogs and a postcard. From Claire. A view of the Oregon coast, cliffs and sky so blue it hurt. Her handwriting was cheerful and a little messy. Aunt Marilyn, thank you for everything. I don't even know what to say, except that I hope you come visit soon. We'll make scones and sit on the porch and pretend the world makes sense. Love, C. I pinned it to the fridge. Later that day, I cleaned out the closet near the front door. It had become a catch-all over the years. Emma's rain boots, Tommy's forgotten rattle, a plastic bin full of broken crayons and unmatched socks. I tossed most of it into a trash bag, not in anger, just in clarity. When I reached the bottom, I found a small, square envelope. Inside was a crayon drawing from Emma. A purple stick figure house, a green lawn, a crooked sun in the corner. And me, in the middle, holding her hand. In blocky letters, me in Grandma's home. I pressed the paper flat, smoothing the wrinkles, then slid it into a folder labeled Keep. I didn't need Jenna's permission to remember who I was. That evening, as the light turned golden across the kitchen floor, I brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat by the window. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't move. It was my time now. No obligations. No explanations. Just the quiet dignity of someone who had finally stopped begging to be loved the right way. I hadn't been back to the library in over a year, not since the day I finally turned in my name badge after 42 years of service and 3 more as a volunteer. I told them it was time. My joints ached. The computers were getting faster than me. And the new director had this way of smiling, like she was always just tolerating me. But on Monday, something nudged me out the door. Not guilt. Not loneliness. Curiosity. I packed my canvas bag with nothing but a notebook and a pen, and I walked the 6 blocks from my house, past the bakery, past the empty parking lot where the old movie theater used to stand, until I reached the familiar stone building with its wide glass doors. It smelled the same. Paper, dust, and that faint undertone of lemon-scented polish they used on the floors. My shoes made the same soft tapping sounds on the tile. I moved slowly, not from pain, but from reverence. This place had been my second home for most of my adult life. Behind the desk sat a young woman I didn't recognize, red hair, thick glasses, earbuds slung around her neck. She looked up and smiled politely. "Hi, can I help you find something?" "No, thank you," I said. "Just browsing." I wandered through the stacks, fiction, large print, local history, all the same shelves, just a few newer spines. Some of the old favorites were still there. Titles I'd reshelved hundreds of times, covers I knew like old neighbors' faces. In the children's corner, a boy no older than 6 sat cross-legged, reading aloud to himself. His mother was nearby, half distracted by her phone. He had a gap in his front teeth, and his voice was sure, proud of every word he didn't stumble on. I watched him for a moment, remembering Emma at that age. How she'd curl against my side and whisper the endings to books before we even got to the last page. I didn't let the memory hurt me. Instead, I smiled. Near the back, in the reference section, I saw a familiar sight. The old donations cart. People used to drop off books, mostly paperbacks with cracked spines or coffee stains. I used to sort them myself, deciding what could be saved and what was best tossed. As I leaned to scan the spines, someone behind me said, "You're Marilyn Joyce, aren't you?" I turned slowly. The red-haired girl from the front desk stood there, holding a clipboard. "Yes," I said, "though I'm not on the staff anymore." "I know, but I've heard about you. You ran the summer reading program for, what, 20 years?" 23, I corrected with a smile. "We used to give out popsicles for the top readers, before the air conditioner worked properly." She grinned. "I'm Alina. I just started 2 months ago. It's honestly kind of overwhelming." "Well," I said gently, "the Dewey Decimal System hasn't changed. That's something." She laughed, then hesitated. "Would you, maybe, I don't know, be willing to come in sometime? Help us sort donations. The backlog's a mess and I could use a second pair of hands." It caught me off guard, being needed for something real, something not tied to family or guilt or obligation. "I'd like that," I said. She seemed relieved. "Great. No pressure, just if you feel like it." I walked home slowly that afternoon, the breeze soft against my neck. I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel small. I felt useful, on my own terms. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote at the top of the first page, "Things I still love. Old books. Quiet mornings. Cinnamon tea. Claire's postcards. My own company." I paused, then added, "Saying no, without apology." The call from Nate came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the garden, trimming back the rosemary bush that had grown wild after the spring rains. The phone buzzed in my apron pocket, and for a moment, I thought of letting it go to voicemail. But I answered. His voice was tight, formal. "Marilyn, we need to talk." I didn't respond right away. I pinched off a dry sprig and dropped it into the compost bucket. "We've been trying to be patient," he continued. "But this is getting out of hand." I leaned against the fence, letting the sun warm my shoulder. "What exactly is out of hand?" I asked. "The money," he snapped. "The sudden cancellations. The trust thing. Jenna's beside herself. She changed the locks on me, Nate. She was upset. I said no to babysitting for one weekend because I had a medical appointment." There was silence. "She felt abandoned. She felt inconvenienced," I corrected. "And instead of talking to me like a grown woman, she sent a message and changed the locks. She's under a lot of pressure. We're all under pressure," I said. "But not all of us retaliate by cutting off our mothers." He exhaled hard, then shifted tones. "Look, let's be reasonable. You're making a statement. We get it. But this is hurting Emma. She misses you. She asks about you every night." The words pierced me more than I expected. Not because they were manipulative, because they were true. But I stayed quiet. "Don't you want to fix this?" he asked. "For her?" I took a breath. "I want a relationship with my granddaughter," I said. "But I won't earn it with silence and money, not anymore." "So what? This is a punishment?" "No," I said. "This is a boundary. You two made a decision. And I'm finally making one of my own." His voice hardened again. "You're destroying this family." "No," I said calmly. "I've been holding it together for years. You just didn't notice until I stopped." I ended the call. I didn't cry. I went back to my rosemary. Later that evening, I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the back steps as the sun dipped low behind the neighbor's roofline. The phone buzzed again. A new message. From Jenna. "Mom, I just don't understand what you're doing. This isn't you. It's cruel. You're leaving us in a mess. The mortgage is due. The cards are maxed. You've always said family takes care of family. Why stop now?" I stared at the screen, then opened my notebook and wrote, "Because I've finally learned that family isn't just who you take care of. It's who takes care of you." The paperwork was finalized that Friday morning. Alan greeted me at the front desk himself, folder already in hand. He didn't ask if I'd changed my mind. He didn't offer one more pause for reflection. He just said, "Everything's in order," and led me to his office. We reviewed the signatures, line by line. My initials here. Full name there. Final signature at the bottom. By the time I handed the pen back, my hand ached, but my shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. "You're officially done," Alan said, placing the final page into its folder. "No further action needed." "I appreciate you," I said. "Truly." He smiled, small and real. "You've done a brave thing, Marilyn." It didn't feel brave. It just felt overdue. Outside, the wind had picked up. Early summer clouds were gathering, and the streets smelled like asphalt and leaves. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the station and bought a ticket. One way, midweek departure. Destination, the Oregon coast. Claire had offered more than once. "Come stay, come breathe. We've got a guest room that's yours anytime," she said. "The ocean's loud enough to drown out everything you don't want to hear," I'd always said later. After the holidays? After Emma's birthday? After someone else's need had passed? Now, there were no more excuses. At home, I started packing. Not hurriedly, not frantically. One drawer at a time. Just what I needed. Comfortable shoes, warm sweaters, my notebooks, a few favorite books. In the back of the closet, I found the blue scarf Jenna had given me 5 Christmases ago, still wrapped in the tissue paper. I pressed it between my hands for a moment, then folded it carefully and placed it in the donation pile. It was soft, beautiful, but not warm. When the bag was full, I called the women's shelter and scheduled a pickup. I didn't need keepsakes anymore. I needed room. That evening, I stood in my bedroom and looked around. The house didn't feel smaller or lonelier. It felt paused, like a song left unfinished on purpose. I wrote a short note to my neighbor, left instructions for the mail hold, and set my alarm. I slept well. In the morning, I brewed coffee, watched the light crawl across the floorboards, and stepped into a day that belonged entirely to me. At the station, I boarded early, found a window seat, and watched the city slip past like an old film. Halfway through the ride, I pulled out my phone. One new message. "Jenna again. I heard about the trust." "Claire? Really? I can't believe you'd leave everything to someone you barely see. After everything we've done for you. You've made your choice. I hope it keeps you warm." I read it once, then deleted it. No response. No fury. Just gone. Across the aisle, a little boy was curled up beside his mother, humming to himself. She ran her fingers gently through his hair, not saying a word. I watched them for a while. Not with envy, not with pain, just with peace. 3 hours later, the train pulled into a small, foggy station. Claire was there, standing beside her car, waving with both hands like a child at a parade. When I stepped off the platform, she pulled me into a hug that didn't ask questions. that didn't need explanations. "You look taller," she said. "I feel it." She laughed. "Come on, I made scones. And there's a chair on the porch with your name on it." We drove with the windows down, the sea breeze folding around us, soft and cold and clean. Claire's house sat on a bluff just high enough to hear the waves but not see them. The wind moved through the tall grass like a whisper, and the porch wrapped around the front like arms that meant to hold you, not just frame the view. Inside, everything smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. There were books on every surface, chipped mugs in the sink, and a cat named Percy, who immediately took to my lap like he'd been waiting for me all along. I didn't unpack right away. I didn't need to. Claire had already set out towels and a sweater on the guest bed, along with a note that read, "If you want to talk, I'll be in the garden. If you don't, I'll still be there." I sat on the porch that first evening with a blanket across my knees and a scone in my hand. Claire joined me with a glass of wine and said nothing for 10 whole minutes, just breathed beside me. Eventually, she asked, "Are you all right?" And I told her the truth. All of it. I told her about the locks, the text, the way Jenna's voice had changed when I said no. I told her about the folders of receipts, the revoked power of attorney, the will, the trust. I told her I didn't cry much anymore, not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood the difference between grief and guilt. She listened, not with pity, but with presence. When I finished, she said, "I think you did something women in this family were never taught to do. You chose yourself." I nodded. "It only took me 74 years. She smiled. "Still faster than most." We sat in the dusk until the stars came out. Then we went inside and made tea. I slept that night with the window open, the sound of the ocean folding in and out like breath. The next morning, we walked down to the shoreline. My knees protested on the gravel path, but I kept going, leaning on Claire's arm when I needed to, not apologizing. At the edge of the water, I stood with my shoes off and let the cold salt sting my ankles. "This," I said, "feels honest." Claire just nodded. That's why I never left. That afternoon, we baked a peach cobbler, played gin rummy on the porch, and argued gently about whether cats understand English. Percy offered no comment. Around sunset, my phone buzzed. Another message. This one different. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I want to. But everything feels broken. Emma won't stop asking about you. She cries at bedtime. Nate doesn't understand why I'm not angrier, but I don't know. I think I miss you." I stared at the screen. Claire noticed. "From her?" I nodded. "She says she misses me. Do you believe her?" "I believe she misses what I gave her." "Is that the same thing?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stepped back out to the porch and looked at the sky. It was streaked with lavender and orange, and the gulls circled slow over the water. For a moment, I pictured Jenna as she used to be. 8 years old, sticky with popsicle juice, running barefoot through the backyard, shouting, "Look, Mom," every 2 minutes. And then I pictured the last text. The lock. The silence. I couldn't reconcile them. Maybe I wasn't meant to. That night, I listened to the ocean instead of answering. I set my phone on the windowsill and whispered, "Not yet." The wind moved through the open room like it had heard me. A week passed, then 2. I stayed in Claire's guest room longer than planned. She never hinted that I'd overstayed. She just added an extra blanket to the bed and more tea bags to the drawer. We developed a rhythm: slow mornings, long walks, small meals. She worked in the afternoons from her laptop in the sunroom, and I read novels I'd forgotten I loved, In the evenings, we sat on the porch and let the world soften. I didn't check my phone every hour. I didn't worry about what might be waiting. And when I did look, I saw only one message. From Emma. Hi, Grandma. Mommy says you're on a trip. I hope you're having fun. I made a picture for you, but I don't know where to send it. It's you and me and the big cookies you made last summer. Can you write back soon? I miss you so much. I read it slowly. 3 times. Then I wrote back. Hi, sweetheart. I miss you too. I'm near the ocean. It's loud and beautiful, and there's a cat here that reminds me of our old gingerbread stories. You can always send pictures to me. I'll keep them forever. You are in my heart every day. She replied within minutes. Just one word. Yay. I didn't hear from Jenna. Not a word. But something strange began to settle in me. Not bitterness, not longing, just understanding. Jenna had made her choices. I had made mine. Maybe someday our paths would meet again, maybe not. But I no longer felt small in the waiting. Claire came home one afternoon with a small box. What's this? I asked. A key, she said, to this house. Just in case you ever want to come back, or never leave. I opened the lid. Inside, a single brass key on a ribbon. I didn't cry, but I held it like something sacred. That evening, I packed a small bag. Not to leave, just to prepare. I wanted to go home, just for a while. To walk through my garden, to open my windows, to sit in my own chair and feel the quiet I had earned. Claire drove me to the train station. She didn't ask when I'd be back. At home, the house was just as I'd left it. Clean, still, waiting, but not needy. I watered the rosemary. I sat on the porch. I brewed my tea. A day later, a knock came. Not Jenna, Emma. Standing on the step, holding a folded drawing in her hands, her backpack crooked on one shoulder. She looked up at me with those same wide eyes I'd once seen blinking through a crib rail. Mommy dropped me off, she said. She said I could stay the weekend, if it's okay. I opened the door without a word. Inside, she kicked off her shoes, ran to the fridge, and laughed when she saw the postcard still hanging. You kept it, she said. Of course I did. That night, she curled up beside me on the couch, cocoa in hand, the old blanket around her legs. We didn't talk about the locks, or the silence, or the weekend that broke the pattern. We read her favorite story, the one with the fox and the moonlight and the line that always made her whisper it back to me. Home is where someone waits for you. I kissed her head, and in that moment, I knew I'd done the right thing. I hadn't left her behind. I'd just finally stopped leaving myself behind. If this story touched something in you, I want you to know this. It's never too late to draw the line, to protect your peace, to start again on your own terms. Leave a comment if you've ever had to make the hard choice, and follow for more stories that speak the quiet truths we don't say out loud.